Hi, welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, the podcast where revenue leaders and sales compensation experts break down the strategies that drive performance. At Forma.ai, we recently hosted RevOps Kickoff 2025, a digital conference designed for revenue operations leaders, covering the most pressing challenges in GTM alignment and strategy. The response was incredible, and we didn't want these valuable discussions to be locked away in a one-time event. So we're interrupting our regular programming to bring you special episodes of our show, featuring the RevOps Kickoff live panels. Different from our usual one-on-one deep dives, these episodes capture live panel discussions with top RevOps executives and industry leaders, tackling the most critical revenue challenges together. Our first RevOps Kickoff live episode is on the topic of RevOps resolutions, what top leaders are prioritizing in the new year. Listen in as our own Deniz Karadadas sits down with Sowmya Srinivasan, VP of Revenue Operations from HubSpot, Rastiello, the VP of Revenue Operations from Health Catalyst, and Tessa Whittaker, the VP of Revenue Operations at ZoomInfo, to discuss the trends, tools, and tactics defining 2025. We hope you enjoy.
Basically, what I would love to do in this first session is really set the stage. See, every company has their own strategic priorities. RevOps teams are asked to, drive that go-to-market motion, drive that revenue growth. So we would love to talk about, what is the, maybe as much as you're able to share, the broad organizational context, and also how is the RevOps team, what are the RevOps team priorities to make that a reality this year? Tessa, if you could start with that would be great.
Sure. So I think, in any type of revenue operations role, we're really thinking, how do you take that high level vision, those top priorities of the company, and then translate them into those tactical execution, work streams and models. And I think, we talked about this before, but as we think about planning, our planning really starts 3 months, 6 months, almost a whole year to the current fiscal. And so when we talk about 2025, we've been going through the exercise of what are we going to do in terms of tactical execution to support those top priorities for months and months and months. And I think the even joke that we had when we were preparing for this is that if we think about planning or prioritization on those top priorities now, we're probably pretty late in the game. And so, whenever we think about what are those top 3 to 5 company priorities, we're thinking across, the entire company, the go-to-market. What are all the things that we need to do from an operational perspective, from a process perspective, from a technical stack perspective, to make sure that we can execute on that? And it's really important that we're able to tie all those different work streams or our own team's prioritization to those top initiatives to ensure that we're able to kind of move the needle and get that done. And I think one of our key focus areas of our jobs is how do we keep that focus and move the needle on those top initiatives to make sure that, we're not either getting scope creep or getting pulled in the wrong direction by all the different things that come up in the day-to-day of revenue operations that can, pull us out of focus of what's the most important thing to move the needle. One of the things we talk about at ZoomInfo is how do we continue to go up market into the enterprise? And so as a RevOps organization, we translate that down to the tactical. And that doesn't always mean that we're going to allocate all of our resources to that specific initiative. It might mean we need to actually allocate resources to another initiative that will allow the upmarket shift in other areas of the business. And so just making sure that we're being very strategic on where we're allocating our resources to support those top initiatives. And I think every RevOps leader on the line will agree with me that I think one of our ongoing challenges is the challenge of prioritization, because we're being asked constantly for our time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And perhaps one of your initiatives is to enable that down market motion, right? To make sure you can go up market. RevOps is often asked to look across the aisle to make sure it all comes together. So that makes sense. How about you, Sowmya? Maybe you can continue with yourself. What is the organizational context you're working with and the initiatives you're working on?
Yeah. So I think very similar to Tessa said, when we think of planning, HubSpot is a very structured and a very robust operating model, I would say. Our planning process starts off maybe 3 to 5 years is the horizon with which we look. It starts off where our executive leadership team at the beginning of the year get together and have this workshop, which is called as Think Big. So that translates into, let's say, here are the 3 to 5 strategic priorities for the organization. I think 3 to 5 years is too long of a time horizon now, so maybe it is 1 to 3 years in the world of AI, right? So here are the strategic priorities for HubSpot, and that comes to each one of the business leaders as well as their operational partners. So those strategic priorities gets translated into key priorities like pillar priorities, and then what does it mean in terms of data, systems, infrastructure, targets, incentives, etc. So so strategy, and then what are the priorities? And then the most important thing that we as an organization obsess about is making sure that you clearly understand how are you going to measure the outcomes and what is considered success for those priorities, right? So the job of the RevOps team is to make sure you put together this, take this very high level strategic priorities into planning objectives for each one of the teams, and on a cadence. So think of this as QBRs, think of this as checkpoint, like monthly meetings, MBRs, where you are reviewing the progress against those priorities. So that's how we do it at HubSpot, a very robust, I will say, operating system and an execution model, and clearly, measurable outcomes against the priorities and strategies that we have.
Yeah.
If I were to, again, just to add a little bit, if I were to think about an example, like Tessa said, you all would have heard about it. Our mission is to make sure our products are, easy, fast, and unified to make sure that we help millions of customers grow better, right? So what this means is, are our products easy to consume? Is our data infrastructure unified? Are customers able to get the view of their customers that they want to deliver value? And then is a product fast for both you as an organization to consume and then deliver value for your customers, right? So this translates into what is a product strategy, what is a customer experience strategy, what is a go-to-market strategy, etc. And that's what the revenue operations team is actually, responsible to orchestrate this year.
Makes sense. It's a product-led growth company, right? So your challenges are different. Makes sense. What about you, Ali? How are things going at Health Catalyst?
So ours is interesting because this was something that I had to learn and overcome when I came in. Our world is small. We sell to healthcare organizations. We only really sell to large hospitals. So we're not selling to like tiny little clinics or anything like that. That makes our TAM extremely tiny. And it's really, what I found my job over the last 3 years has been is how do we continue to develop healthy pipeline in such a small TAM? How do we also do a lot of acquisitions at our company? So our priorities have to be stacked between how do we take these acquisitions that we're making and incorporate them and do the migrations into our systems on top of still supporting our sales and marketing and all of our go-to-market functions. So a lot of what I tend to do is kind of look at how do we mature the organization in a way that makes sense versus we think we need, an AI tool. Well, are we ready for that yet? And what does it take to get ready for that? Let's make sure we have those pieces in play because we have limited time, limited budget, limited TAM even to execute some of this stuff. So we have to be very judicial about how we prioritize and what we prioritize. So I feel like my mission is a lot more around how do we mature the organizations in from a tools perspective, a process perspective, and even how we go to market and think about executing some of these things perspective, more than how do we meet the needs of the immediate, this week's priorities or this week's strategy, because our strategy changes very rapidly all the time. So it may be a little bit different than some of what Tessa and Sowmya are dealing with in terms of their bigger companies that are that have basically the world at their fingertips. They can sell to anyone. We can't do that. So it's very strategic what we have to go in and pinpoint.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Health Catalyst being a more acquisition-driven, industry-focused company, and Tessa is obviously working with ZoomInfo to go enterprise, upmarket, and Sowmya is dealing with a product-led growth. So you're all dealing with different challenges, but I would love to hear perhaps, I think I heard it from a couple of you, but would love to double click on, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing this year? Maybe there are some common patterns amongst all three of you. Ali, do you want to get us going on that?
Our biggest challenge is really developing a healthy pipeline and knowing what's driving that healthy pipeline. So I've sort of shifted my personal focus to that. I have great like sales leaders and sales ops people that are, focusing on the day-to-day. How do we facilitate the deals and move forward in sales? But I'm worrying about how do we get pipeline so we still have sales. Along with the marketing team, they just sort of got scooped up under our organization. So now we're one big growth team with marketing and sales all together. So really focusing on maturing those teams and those processes, from how we go to market, how we execute marketing, how we incorporate sales outreach, and what does that look like, and making sure that they're unified in that marketing's messaging that they're putting out there via advertising and different programs is the same thing that the sales team is doing in terms of prospecting and that kind of stuff. And then how do we marry all of that together and see what's truly driving the pipeline growth that we need? That's sort of where I'm focusing and how I'm trying to mature the organization this year. And it's, a little bit of a challenge. I work in a whole industry that is a little bit behind on the curve of like what more modern B2B organizations do. It's healthcare. It's a little bit old school. We love to go to our in-person events, and that's how we do our marketing. So it's a little bit of a challenge to think about how do we automate a lot of these things and how do we use data and AI to really help us drive that.
Yeah, makes sense. I think AI, obviously aligning go-to-market, the marketing and sales is the perennial challenge, shall we say, for RevOps leaders. But obviously AI is something new that's coming to the picture. What about yourselves, Sowmya? Maybe we can go with you next.
I would say, I think you kind of led me there. I would say AI is the biggest challenge this year. Imagine that. We should keep count of how many times we say AI in this panel, right? So the pace at which the technology is evolving and the infrastructure that you have within your organization in terms of readiness to mobilize the org, I would say is the biggest challenge for a revenue ops organization. You have to mobilize the business, you have to mobilize your stakeholders, while also making sure that you as an ops team have the skill set to kind of absorb the pace of the technology and you're able to deliver the tools that the reps need, right? So, and I think the other thing that I would say, especially as a revenue operations leader, is you can put together all of the biggest tools, fancy new, tricks for your reps, but driving adoption is going to be really key. So selling the value not only to your customer from all of the AI features that you're enabling the product suite with, but making sure that the reps are able to consume what you're putting together in terms of insights that can help drive the customer experience for the organization, right? So two things, making sure you keep up pace with the evolving technology. And then second thing is making sure that you're able to mobilize your organization to consume all of the things that you are developing. I would say these two are definitely top of mind for us as a RevOps organization.
Yeah, and I think I'll layer in there. So I think one of the challenges that any RevOps professional or question that a RevOps professional is being asked right now is, what is your AI strategy? And so how do you start to think about that? And I have joked about this quite a bit, that your AI strategy starts with your data strategy. Luckily, I work at ZoomInfo, so I think I have the most exciting job RevOps right now because I have the data strategy figured out. But as we think about how do you re-architect, all your internal processes that are automated into your tech stack, how do you think about every single flow from lead to opportunity, opportunity to contract, quote to cash, and where can you actually remove manual effort and to automate? And how do you leverage AI to bring in your first party and third party data, take out that manual, maybe manual intervention that you had before, and actually create systems and processes that help drive the business forward with less resources, which is incredibly exciting. And I think a lot of people, the questions I get, or a lot of different folks in RevOps will say, like, where do you start? And it's really as simple of going back to what are those top company priorities, and then working back and saying, okay, if we're trying to achieve these top 3 things, these top 5 things, what are the areas in revenue operations we need to focus to move the needle, and how can AI really help with that? But of course, you do need your data layer, your virtual data layer. You need something to build those AI agents on top of. And I think a lot of RevOps leaders are challenged with how do we get the right data and have a data strategy to support that. And, we all know we can't leverage CRM right now. CRM isn't the single source of truth like it was for many, many years. And I can say that I worked at Salesforce. I was part of the single source of truth CRM pitch for many, many years. But you have to have a virtual data layer. You need your data platform. And so I think that probably is the biggest challenge for RevOps as a whole. And then once you get past that, and I think where I am right now is how do I re-architect at scale leveraging AI, and where do I start? So we're really excited about that. More to come, I'm sure, from this group on what that looks like in the next months or even year. Because as you mentioned, Sowmya, it's evolving rapidly, and how do we keep up? But I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And I would say the only thing I'd say back is I know adoption is something that is so top of mind for all of us, or enablement, or if we put out these AI bots, like how do we get the agents to be adopted? But actually, there's a lot you can do even in the back end of our systems to leverage AI that people don't even know about, that make their lives easier, that we're not asking for the field to change how they're working. It actually just takes tasks away from them. So really excited about what's to come, but definitely one of our biggest opportunities right now.
I agree with Tessa. There's so much that you can do in the background that like nobody even really knows you're doing, or you're just like, hey, now you don't have to do this 65 manual step process to log an activity because we've done all this stuff for you on the back end that you don't even know about. Those things are where I think RevOps shines, when they can bring that sort of lift to the sales team or the marketing team, so that they're like, oh, and it like starts a lot of like ideas around what else they can do. I think that's where, we have our biggest impact.
I mean, plus one to both what Tessa and Ali said, right? I think data is the new gold, right? I think we read it somewhere. Without data, there is no AI. So I think that is where the adoption could actually make or break. So how good your data is determines all of the capabilities that you can enable your organization with. So I think data integrity, making sure that the infrastructure is robust, to develop all the capabilities that you can deliver to your organization and to your customers, I think it's going to be the biggest thing, probably not just this year, maybe a couple more years to come. Yeah.
Not the ZoomInfo RevOps leader switching the conversation to data and why it's so important. But anyone on the call, you know where to find me.
I will say that if you're operating without a data orchestration tool in your tech stack, you're way behind the curve and absolutely need that.
It's funny because Sowmya is obviously representing HubSpot here, so she might have a different idea of whether CRM is the source of truth. But we'll leave that on a different chat.
I said Salesforce when I made that comment, so she was okay with that.
Now, I think you're all three are highlighting very different aspects that I want to pick on. Like we talked about adoption, we talked about data architecture, we talked about where do you start. Maybe we can pick on these different themes, and maybe you can start with Ali. You mentioned the data orchestration. How do you think about sort of RevOps sitting on top of the whole data architecture and orchestrating the whole thing? And how do you go about that? How do you define a data orchestration tool?
So when I think about data orchestration, I'm like, there's the most base layer of it as, is your data stood up for action? Is it all normalized? Is it broken down into, like, for instance, when you're bringing in, you have a form that people are filling out and they're like writing their version of their title. and you know that you need to target certain titles to, in your overarching strategy. How do you normalize that so that it's easy to activate on from a segmentation standpoint, from a targeting standpoint with your ad campaigns or with your outreach via your, your sales teams? That to me is like table stakes. If you don't have that figured out, you can't go to the next step. So if you're not breaking down like a job title into a job role and job function that's standardized, it's really hard for you to orchestrate anything for anyone, let alone put an AI agent on top of that. Then you start bringing in things like activity layers of, the tracking and things that you're doing in marketing, the tracking you're doing in sales, and how does that roll into business outcomes? Like what is actually driving a deal into the pipeline? Like really understanding those things, to me, that's just the very basic levels of what data orchestration is, and really lining that up to your life cycle and how all of those processes work in tandem, especially for like a company like me. Cross-sell is a really big piece of our go-to-market strategy. We have a huge footprint, and in the hospital systems that we work with, we really are looking to make that sticky and grow them across our portfolio. So in order to do that, you have to have a very clear life cycle and know how that's orchestrated and managed throughout the sales and marketing process. So to me, that's like it's basic stuff, but those things are the foundations of what will make your AI agents and like even your teams really start thinking creatively of how to, implement these things and do newer, cooler, more interesting work.
That makes sense. And obviously this is probably slightly more important in a company that's more acquisition driven or trying to cross-sell more, in your case, and Ellie, trying to orchestrate different data sources from the different acquired entities. That makes total sense.
Yep.
Sowmya, there was a comment on chat that I want to ask you about, maybe on the adoption topic. Kelsey says he's one of your strategic partners, and you do a great job of balancing carrot versus stick, and making AI tools remarkable so people want to use them rather than forcing them. How do you go about that? Maybe let's talk about adoption as well.
Yeah. So the way in which we operate, is we have business champions embedded into our processes. So, again, operations teams are not like operating in their own silos, like coming up with, hey, here's a new tool for you to use. Our business stakeholders, like Kelsey is actually the chief of staff for customer success. So thank you, Kelsey, for being here and posting that. So she is one of our strategic partners. She is the voice of the reps, rep experience at HubSpot, and she brings us together from the roundtables she hosts, etc., in terms of feedback that she hears from the ground. And then when we think about a solution that we are developing for the reps, or even customer facing, we have the champions embedded into our process, helping us understand the business requirements, helping us making sure that we clearly understand what is it that we are trying to solve, and then coming up with realistic goals in terms of what we can impact, right? So I think us telling the customers, us telling the our business partners in terms of here is value that we are sharing with you, is very different than a business stakeholder, a customer success rep, or a sales rep saying, I've used this tool and here is what it has helped me save. So I feel like that is the most easiest way to sell. If a product sells itself, you don't need all of those all of the sales reps, all of the sales cycles that goes into selling a product, right? That is a whole easy, fast, and unified motion that we are trying to operationalize. So I would say that is the approach even internally within HubSpot. When we think about enabling our reps with tools, etc., we have business champions who actually become the voice, who are able to share those insights on what works and what doesn't, and who are able to inform us on capabilities that they think that we should be enabling them with, which is going to help augment the customer experience. So that is a carrot versus the stick approach. So it's mostly carrot, hopefully no stick. Yeah.
That makes sense. And obviously, at HubSpot, you're in a unique position of using your own AI tools, presumably, with your sales reps. So that makes total sense.
That is right. We are a HubSpot on HubSpot. So yeah.
Perfect. And Tessa, you mentioned the ZoomInfo. Being in ZoomInfo, you have a unique position on where to use data to drive certain pieces. Where in the sales funnel do you use AI today, or do you plan on turning that on?
Yeah, well, I can share a story of kind of a project that we ran last year that is now actually part of one of our products. So we partnered with product. It was kind of the beginning of last year, and we said, there is this opportunity at the turn of the year when all of our account managers get their new accounts, so everyone's switching over their territories, to give them all the information that they would need on their account, all the historicals, in order to hit the ground running. So I think as RevOps professionals, especially if you're looking after the sales operations pillar of your business, that account planning, territory planning, historically was incredibly manual and very time consuming for your account executives, your account managers. And, you had to kind of make trade-offs where you'd say, okay, you're going to only do 5 account plans for your most strategic accounts, or when you're territory carving, you really only need to work cross-functionally and come up with proactive plans, let's say for your tier 1 accounts, just because it was so manual to figure out, okay, how did we work with them before, especially if this is a new account this salesperson has gotten? How did we work with them before? What was the conversations we had last year? What are the things that they're thinking about for this coming year, et cetera? And so what we did was we figured out how we could pull in all of our first party data. So all of those emails and calls, et cetera, how we could pull in, all the third party data. So what are the things that, what were in the last financial earnings statements? What were things that maybe executive leadership talked about on podcasts? What are the things that they publicly have talked about that they want to go focus on? Or, where do we think that there's opportunity that in that account, and actually pull all that first and third party data together, create account summaries for every single account. And at the turn of the year, when everyone got their new territories and accounts, give that to them. And so if you think about from a time savings, to be able to give that for every single account was such a lift, and ability for any sort of salesperson to be able to work faster and have a more strategic perspective of their territory. And so that actually ended up being built into our product. That's our AI account summaries now. And so if you're in ZoomInfo, you're in your Copilot, and you go to any account at any time, that you can go and see their account summary, and you have all the information on that account. And anyone has access to that. And it's funny, I was actually out to dinner with a sales executive. This was a few months ago, and he had to stand up because his CEO was calling him over and over again because he was about to go onto a call with a customer, and he didn't have the last information. And so leveraging AI, we were able to pull in first party, third party data, create a real-time account summary that anyone could access at any time. And so that was just an example of there's this pain point. How do we leverage AI to do this at scale? And guess what? It got built into the product. And so that was something that we did that, was kind of an innovative idea that ultimately went from an internal use case to customer facing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's one of those examples of AI doing the heavy lift, so you can go have your conversation with the customer and then do the human part of the equation, right?
Exactly. And now we're actually exploring it further for this year. And it's how do you actually have the AI make those next best action recommendations?
Makes sense. That's fascinating. I've also, obviously, as part of my role, I also keep up with the latest developments. I think last week there was an event, and OpenAI announced their SDR offering. And this effectively is a AI agent that will get all the incoming leads from your website, do the data enrichment, third party, first party data, scour the web, and effectively come up with an automated email in the correct language to send, hey, you're interested in our product. Here are the open times with one of our AEs. So I thought that was an interesting one, to take out some of the heavy lifting and let the humans do the talking, so to speak.
I think AI SDR is something we're all hearing a lot about, and a lot of different companies are obviously exploring that. I think that, it goes back to that comment though, that you can't build your AI SDR, you can't build that agent on top of your CRM data, because your CRM data doesn't have your TAM. And so thinking about even prospecting or anything else, you still need that virtual data layer that has your TAM that SDR can sit on top of. So I just want to say, like, again, kind of bringing back the point that like AI is a big challenge, but data is the underlying challenge that everyone needs to solve.
Yeah, makes sense.
The thing that we are working on, again, I will probably talk about the post-sales world a little bit, leading into my experience here. We have an initiative called Guided Success, which means making sure our customer success reps truly understand how customers are using the value, who is the customer, what are all the interaction points that they have had beyond just the, let's say, CSM world. So think of this as what are the support interactions that they have, what are the sales interactions that they had, etc. And to be able to surface the right insights to the CS reps to have the most value-adding conversations that they can have with the customer. So think of this as call summaries, think of this as account summaries, think of this as usage summaries. So, and then like think of this as, maybe the customer is actually leveraging all of the products so well that you want to position, here is the next best thing that you could be using from a HubSpot standpoint, right? And then many customers also want to know how are other customers like using the products, right? Like so that you can learn from each other's use cases. So these are all something that, we want to make sure we are enabling our reps with so that they can have enable the customers with all of the insights that they need to understand the product value better. Maybe they are not using all of the features that they are entitled to. They could be leveraging and they could be benefiting from, right? So when we call this guided success, again, the motion is different from up market and down market. Up market, it's more augmenting the human experience, and then down market, it's more of to scale motion, right? So auto sending the emails, making sure that we are sharing the usage scorecards with the customers, etc. So I would say that has really helped us move the needle on making sure you have the most contextual information with the customer, because context is everything, right? And context is clarity, without which you're not going to have the impact on the customer that you could potentially have. So we call it guided success because it guides the reps to have the right relevant conversations for with the customers, and also making sure that we are able to promote product usage as much as we can through AI-generated summaries, both from a Gen AI, predictive AI, as well as AI agents.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For us, I think really honing in on intent signals is really important to us, and how do we orchestrate and activate all of the go-to-market teams and account management teams around what we're seeing from an intent perspective. So we have a high, I don't want to say a high churn problem, but we are very reticent of our churn or potential churn for the year. And it's how do we help predict where churn might be happening using intent signals, using information that we have from internal systems, and really surfacing that to our account managers so that they can get on top of it and maybe see how they can, augment that or help to facilitate that or eliminate it, I should say. So that's one of them. Another one that was a big, blind spot for our sales teams was that they had no idea if a lead came through marketing, what marketing was doing, saying what campaigns were happening. So we're looking at AI summaries of all of that front end marketing activity so that when, a lead comes through, whether it's an expansion lead or a new business lead, it comes through and they understand what they've been consuming, what they're interested in without anybody having to do anything for it. It's a summary that will live in Salesforce based on some technologies we're looking at.
One thing, Ali, and this is kind of hot off the press / something I'm actually working on even today. Okay. You touched on just thinking through like, how do you prevent the churn? But the reality of the world we live in is we don't all have perfect retention. But when we do churn, we do lose a customer, what do we do? What is the journey after that? How do we go after that customer? How do we win them back? And so what I'm actively working on now is how do you leverage AI anytime a customer churns to understand, again, through first and third party data as much as possible, what was the reason? And then based on that, being able to kind of segment or tier those accounts to understand where do you need to go back manually versus where can you automate something to kind of put them into an automated journey in order to go after and hopefully win them back. But transparently, that's something that we had relied on our sellers to manually input at the time of churn. And if you're relying on manual input, we know time and time again, you're getting inaccurate data. So I think that's something, as a RevOps professional, really taking a lens across your sales process and you're saying, where am I relying on manual input into the CRM or otherwise? And is that an opportunity to automate leveraging AI? And that's some of probably the lowest hanging fruit. If you're sitting on this call and you're overwhelmed by the conversation on data strategy and AI, and you want a kind of simple, where do I start? Where is there manual entry where, to data points that you want to pull out to action, where you're not getting, the most accurate or clean results. And that's usually where you'll find some of that low-hanging fruit that can be the most impactful.
Yeah, makes sense. And Tessa, you touched on this and getting that right data quality. And I think Ali, you also mentioned intent data. And there was a question in the chat that I want to sort of pick on a bit. When it comes to all these different tools, obviously, like intent data is a good example. You need to get trust built into the system that makes sure this works. Otherwise, people will just start ignoring it. How do you go about building that trust with your respective organizations in AI, that it's doing the right thing as opposed to going haywire?
Sure.
I identify champions and then I test with them, and we work through the problems until we know that they feel comfortable with the outcomes, and then we start to roll it out more broadly. That's like the only way that I have seen it work, is by getting someone in that role that you're trying to roll this out to buy in from a champion and know that they are saying, no, I worked through this problem with them. It is trusted. It is, we should all, buy into this.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think, if you're in RevOps and you're not running like proper QA and UAT, that's a place to start. And we don't want to skip that even for the price of speed. I think that, also just making sure that you're monitoring, I think monitoring, especially, right post-release of anything you're doing is so critical, and making sure that you have those health checks. But I definitely wouldn't recommend full deployment without any sort of monitoring and data baseline that you're consistently checking.
Perfect. I think we've covered this big, hairy topic as much as we can. I just want to switch gears just a little bit. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges of anybody in RevOps is trying to drive alignment across the organization, the customer success, the marketing team, the sales team. I guess the question to each of you, maybe we can start with perhaps Ali. How do you manage this alignment problem in your organization? Do you have any recommendations to folks listening?
That is not an easy question. The big thing that I can say is this: just be data informed. There's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of feelings, especially when you talk about marketing. Marketers have feelings. And if you can't structure it around like facts around what's working or what's actually helping you build growth, you can't really have the alignment you need. The other piece of that is also there needs to be alignment at the C-suite. If it's not there, it's nearly impossible to drive that between your go-to-market teams and your customer success teams. That C-suite has to have some level of a product strategy, a vision for the business that you can all latch onto, and then everybody's kind of working towards that same North Star. If that's not there, the alignment is really difficult. So pushing on your personal C-suite that you roll into, and making sure that they have their seat at the table, that they are driving your concerns forward at that top level, is one of the key things to, I think, really getting that alignment done at the highest levels first, and then letting it trickle down to all the teams we support.
Makes sense. Should we go to Sowmya next?
I mean, I would say +1 to what Ali said, right? So I think having alignment at the C-suite level. So we call it the flywheel leadership. We have the marketing leader, the sales leader, the CS leader, as well as the operations leader get together on a weekly basis. They clearly understand what is the go-to-market. It is an aligned go-to-market. And then what does it mean in terms of mobilizing their organizations forward, right? So understanding what is the strategy, what is the thing that you are trying to drive, like what are the priorities as aligned to the strategy in each pillar of the organization, and then like what are the outcomes that you intend to deliver for your function, your business, etc. I think having the clarity is very important. And I think as a revenue operations professional, you have to understand the why. You should be able to understand the big picture of what is it that we are trying to do as an organization, and then translate it down into objectives for each one of the business stakeholders that you are working with. And it is easier said than done, but I think making sure that you don't have silos, you are thinking across the business lines, you're sharing information, and then having the reviews as an entire organization where you have all of these pillars together along with product, I think is the most helpful way that I have seen this done. And I feel like that alignment has made the RevOps job easier. Here at HubSpot, we have an exceptional flywheel leadership team who spend a lot of time with product, truly understand the alignment. And I think that has helped us go through the execution of this year much stronger than we could have had. So I think alignment starts at the top, and your job is to mobilize the organization following that direction.
Interesting. I had heard the term flywheel before, but I'd never heard of a flywheel leadership gathering. That makes total sense. What about you, Tessa?
Yeah, so
how do you drive alignment?
I'm aligned with everyone on the call that alignment is tops down, period, right? So and that's why you hear in the themes that we're talking about, which is what are the top 3 to 5 priorities of the company? What are the top 3 to 5 KPIs that we're going after? And then the goal setting, right? And the work streams and the tactical execution that should come down with that. But I'm not going to triple click on that. I think just to add maybe something in parallel, and something that's really top of mind for me and something that I'm pushing my team on extremely hard right now, is that alignment doesn't equal more meetings. And in fact, if you're spending all of your time in meetings to align and to talk about the things that you're meant to be doing, then you're not operating very efficiently. And so I think when you're looking at, as a RevOps professional, the productivity, the efficiency of your organization, because you should be looking at that for your internal operational team and not just the company. If you find that your team is at capacity, if you find that your team is struggling to prioritize, I would bet if you were to peel the layer back on that, you would find that they're in a lot of meetings around alignment. And so that goes back to our responsibility as leadership, our leaders' responsibility as leadership, our leaders' responsibility in leadership is to ensure there's that tops down alignment so that these teams don't spend all of their time in meetings aligning, and that we actually shift our focus back to execution. And I think that I've seen a trend maybe in the last couple of years, even maybe coming out post-pandemic, that people think that they're really productive if they spend all their time in meetings. And when you actually look at it, most of those meetings are about alignment. One thing I will share very, very quickly, a tip and trick for everyone on this call, and I would recommend you do it, and then I would recommend you ask your teams to do it as well. But in the spirit of using AI to make us all better, go into Google Calendar, if that's what you use, and export your calendar. And then you're going to upload your calendar into ChatGPT, and you're going to ask it to create an executive summary of what types of meetings you are and what percentage of your time is there. And then you're going to take that and go to Notebook LM, and you're going to create a podcast, a short podcast that you're going to listen to yourself of how you're spending your time. And I guarantee you're going to find a lot of opportunity for you to get time back in your day to shift from alignment back to execution. And so that's my tip for all of you today.
Interesting. I might cut this webinar early to go and do this right now. Anyway, I'm joking. That's a very interesting tip.
It's
Thank
wild.
you. Thank you.
It's fascinating. But if your teams are saying they're at capacity, I challenge you to have them stop themselves and have them
Interesting.
read out to you.
Perfect. So I just want to maybe just try to wrap it up a bit in that spirit. Tessa, Ali, and Sowmya, I want to sort of, my last question to you that I want to discuss a bit more is like, if there's one learning that you want to part with, I would love to talk about that.
For me, I think it would be that there's a lot of great ideas out there and a lot of like great tools and great AI, this, new magic frontier that we're all talking about. How to activate all of those ideas and thoughts and cool things into a way that's actionable. Because what I was finding was that we were jumping here, jumping there, and being like, well, let's solve this problem, let's solve this problem. But what we weren't really doing is thinking about, is this activating the sales team the right way? Is this taking time out of or is this giving them time back in their day to go do the selling? Or is this just giving them another thing that they have to do in order to facilitate that sale? We were like, we want to track all of these things. We want all this data. Go do this, go do this, go do this. And realizing that like, well, now they don't have time to prospect, or now they don't have time to, have the calls they need or travel the way they need to, because we're asking them to do so many things that are probably helpful in our jobs, but maybe not in theirs. So then it's like, pair that back, and how do I do things that makes it easier on them to go and do what they need to do, which is close business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can share. I mean, I think I gave my best tips, certainly, around increasing productivity. I would say that in 2024, I had a mindset shift. I think I used to believe that to go quick or to go fast, build fast, meant you build twice, right? I think that I had a strong foundational belief that if you go really, really fast, that you lose quality. And sometimes there's a trade-off with that. And I think that that's changed quite a bit for me. I think that you can go fast and do things properly. I think when we're thinking about execution and you have like that long-term goal or strategy or vision, there are going to be work streams that take longer, but there are quick wins. There are things that you can execute right away in order to move the needle as you're on that longer journey to transformation. And so I again, would just challenge any RevOps leader when they have an initiative or they have a big project and they're saying this is something that's going to take 3 to 6 months to deliver for their leaders. I'd say, sure, the big transformational final deliverable might take 3 to 6 months. But what are those things that you can release weekly, bi-weekly, monthly along the way that move the needle to get results that you don't need to wait 3 to 6 months for? And so just make sure that any big initiative that you have, you're segmenting those work streams, which are what can we deliver along the way to move the needle, and what are the things that are going to take longer. But I don't think it's, I don't think it's either or you lose quality. I think we all need to move faster to execute. And that comes from obviously great tops down alignment, which we're all driving here. But just, I think we need to move faster.
Thank you. How about you, Sowmya?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say 2 things I learned. I would say first thing is probably, leading into what Tessa and Ali shared. I think it's a do greater than deliberate, right? It is, you rather get started, iterate, experiment, and even if you fail fast. So at least you have tried and you know what's working and what's not working. So definitely lean into experimentation. The second thing that I would say is, I think alignment across the go-to-market is more critical than ever. I would say, especially now where customer centricity is paramount. So customer expect us to understand them, expect us to know everything about them, and they expect us to deliver value, right? So make sure that you drive alignment. Misaligned strategies, also fragmented customer experience impacts growth. So I would say make sure you take the time to align your organization to deliver against those objectives that you set for yourself and the organization leaders set for the company. So that is my two.
Perfect. That makes sense. And as usual, three of you are good examples of RevOps leaders who are tasked with being the guardians of their data, of their organization, driving alignment across marketing, sales, and customer operations, as well as executing fast, but not too fast, because you're customer-facing tools and you're the engine of revenue. So I wanted to take a minute to thank you to all three of you to joining today. It's been I think, great session, and I think everybody's learned a lot from all three of you.
The Sales Compensation Show is brought to you by Forma.ai, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma.ai, visit our website at Forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.